Welcome back to the Motivational Intelligence Podcast, where we dive into the mindsets and strategies that unlock extraordinary leadership, high-performance teams, and lasting success. Today, we're talking about a topic that really every executive and every business leader faces, which is building a thriving culture in a rapidly changing world. And to help us explore this, we brought together a powerhouse panel of experts. So joining us today is Doug McDermott, Chief Learning and Development Officer at First State Community Bank, who has led transformative organizational changes in a dynamic and high-growth industry. Chad King, Certified Sales Trainer and Director of Payments at First State Community Bank, a leader who's really helped redefine what it means to lead with impact in financial services and build a powerful sales organization. And our very own John Casey, a world-class leadership trainer with decades of experience coaching high-performing executives and organizations worldwide. So in this conversation, we explore how First State Community Bank transformed its leadership culture using motivational intelligence, the challenges of scaling leadership in a high-growth company, why self-leadership is the foundation of building high-impact teams, how to build a proactive sales organization when people don't believe they can sell, and so much more. So if you're an executive, a business leader, or an aspiring high performer, this episode is packed with insights that you can apply immediately. Please enjoy. This podcast is powered by Mojo, the people transformation platform. As a global top 20 training firm and the world leader in motivational intelligence development, our clients kept asking us a question: what does the future of professional development look like? So think of this podcast as a teaser for what could exist inside your organization. Because we all use podcasts and AI to learn and improve in our personal lives, right? So why are we not using podcasts and AI to transform our people at work? We've taken everything we've learned from working with 40% of the Fortune 500 in 97 countries worldwide. And we've combined it with cutting-edge technology to give you the most powerful weapon in the history of human development. Here's how it works. Almost like magic, what Mojo does is it generates powerful, targeted conversations among employees to rapidly resolve challenges like low or unbalanced performance, high turnover, poor leadership, low change readiness, low succession readiness, or the merging of cultures and the elimination of silos. Along the way, Mojo embeds a success culture into the DNA of every team at your organization and enhances every interaction your people have from now on, both inside and outside of work. Start a 14-day free trial of Mojo today at joinmojo.com/trial and experience what has changed hundreds of thousands of lives around the world, mine included. So get started now at joinmojo.com/trial. That's joinmojo.com/trial.
And the more I studied it, the more I began to see that that was the overwhelming commonality of the most successful people that I ever met.
And just the empowerment of the conversations, how it just really motivates you. You don't come across people that impact you that way.
Because a lot of people could say to me, oh yeah, no, I get it. But yet they really don't get it.
This, if you really lean into it, can be life-changing.
Mojo's is part of our DNA and what we do during team meetings.
And I just looked at Randy like, oh my God.
I feel like that's made a lot of impact in my direct report's life because they're not afraid to talk to me.
But I started to see what this gentleman did in podcast. And I was like, it was just kind of surreal because it was almost like he foreshadowed what I was going to be up against that point.
They would come in every week and ask me, Paul, how far would you like to get? That's when I told them 105%. And they laughed and I said, no, 105% is where I'm going to be.
I think that concept is one that everybody can buy into, and saying that I can improve 1% from yesterday.
An unstoppable state of mind that enables you and I to achieve everything that we want out of our professional and our personal life.
So I've been really excited to have this conversation. We have Doug McDermott with us, Chad King, and one of our very own, John Casey. Doug is the Learning and Development Officer at First State Community Bank. Chad is a certified sales trainer there, as well as, Chad, you got some other titles there too, right?
Yeah, I'm also the Director of Payments for First State Community Bank.
There you go. Okay. Also Director of Payments. So a man of many talents. And so I've been excited for this conversation. You know, First State has partnered with Too Logical and John specifically for, I don't know, what's it been? Has it been close to a decade now? It's been a while, right?
Close.
Close.
2016, 17 timeframe. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right, we're flirting with a decade at this point. John's always said such great things about both of you and, just who you are as people and the work that you've done together there. You've overseen some really incredible transformations from an organizational standpoint. So I've been excited to have this conversation, and I wanted to kind of just talk about your personal experiences, your experience as executives, and because I think it will be helpful for people in roles similar to yours, and just in general, anybody in a leadership role to see kind of how you view things and what your experience has been and what you've kind of learned along the way. Wanted to kind of start with maybe how you kind of first came across motivational intelligence. How did the journey begin for you in terms of your awareness around motivational intelligence and, eventually the application of it, personally and professionally? Doug, maybe we'll start with you.
So Too Logical does a great job of reaching out to companies that they want to help. And some of your correspondence actually made it to some leaders in this organization. I'd been here for probably about 2 years and really studying kind of where we were strong and where we needed to grow our people, as that's part of our role. And it was really exciting to see a company that wanted to help get to the root cause of why people did or didn't take certain actions. The financial industry is in a really changing time, but you look at the history of what made financial industry successful, it was very concrete thinking. It's numbers, it's things that don't adapt and change. So you're asking people who have a real history of being strong there to be facing new technology, new processes. And it was exciting to think that we might be able to use that motivational intelligence to really build up a foundation for skills development and helping us navigate through change. And so that one email that trickled its way to me led to a long conversation of saying, when's the right time? And eventually that time hit when we're at a spot where it was right to make some changes to our core values and put some of that additional foundation in place.
Yeah. That's very cool. So just to kind of recap real quick, because I'm curious, you said a couple of things that I wanted to kind of double click on. One was there were certain things in certain areas you noticed as you kind of got into the organization where you really wanted to help people grow. And you kind of talked about a really kind of change readiness. Was that the biggest driver? What were some of the areas where you realized that you needed to help, people in the organization grow and develop?
For sure. As an organization that started very small with just a couple bank branches and then went through a time of a lot of acquisition, you look at bringing on new employees, you look at new technology systems and the ability to turn the boat rather quickly, whether that's with teams or with processes, was just really increasing. And so in those moments, you have to look forward and say, what are we going to do now to change that trajectory to make that readiness stronger?
Yeah. Those are really two really common ones that, when we start working with somebody, those are probably two of the most common is, change readiness. All of a sudden there's changes to this person's role and how the organization is operating that, we're not really sure if they get down the path of, can I really do this? I like the way we used to do it and, all that kind of stuff. And then, the merging of cultures too, when we start bringing these different cultures together, you have, group A and group B and, group A likes to do it this way and group B likes to do it that way. And, it can be a real challenge. So that makes a lot of sense.
Our organization was founded on and had a lot of really strong connection to our core values. And that was something that I think was a real strong point coming in, that there was already an idea that we needed to share principles, but a lot of those principles were geared toward the actions that somebody would take, as opposed to necessarily the thoughts and beliefs. So when we went through a bit of the transformation and adopted some of those core values or our core values from motivational intelligence, it wasn't changing necessarily the old, but it was saying, let's take a step backward and look at what really drives people at that thoughts and beliefs level. Because John, I think you say in a lot of our classes that culture is actually the dominant thoughts and beliefs of a group of people, and the behaviors flow from that, and it becomes your organization's climate. So for us to really look at, that growth mindset and the motivational intelligence, it was an aha moment to say, we're trying to do the right things, but let's shift back just a bit to say, what's the belief? And it impacts hiring, it impacts people development, it impacts, how you manage change. It impacts everything.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so I definitely want to circle back to the culture and the company values in a bit, because I think there's some interesting things to, explore there. I want to ask before we go, and then I kind of want to hear, Chad's quick introduction to this whole world. But before I go there, Doug, you kind of mentioned the other piece of it was, okay, figuring out when's the timing right. How did you think about that? What were some of the factors that you looked at in terms of, okay, now is the moment, now is the time?
I think anybody in an influencing change role has to read the landscape. And you'll notice those kinds of early precursors, and you hear conversations about different teams that you're trying to develop. And you have to really just sense when the readiness is right. And I think knowing what's out there, knowing these tools, and then picking the right time helps that adoption grow so much, so much stronger. Because we had some leadership conversations where we were talking about what matters the most and what's going to be critical moving forward. And it was a natural dovetail. So then to bring our executive leadership team and let them experience some of the introspection and some of the really deep thought about leadership when you think of it in terms of motivational intelligence versus just management and leadership tactics, when they could apply it personally, in a very short amount of time, it was the obvious choice for us to take steps down that.
Yeah. And so it was a sense of, the executive team, the leadership team kind of being at the moment in time where they recognize the importance of it. That was the biggest factor.
Yeah. Of course, to have the catalyst to say, hey, let's look at this opportunity, and knowing that it was matched and that it would be a strong partnership.
Yeah. And what do you think it was that got the executive leadership to that point of realizing it was important? Were they starting to see, were some of the numbers starting to go off? Was it just kind of a cultural feel that like something doesn't feel right? What do you think got them to that spot?
No, I think our performance has been strong. What happens is you see changes in the workforce. If you go back to, 2015, 2016, 2017, a real big generational shift. I think at that point, the big topic of conversation was the millennials. That's not the conversation anymore. As I kind of look at the camera in the mirror and I'm like, well, millennials, we're getting a little older. But just the normal shift in business and workforce. And I think everybody is always asking questions and trying to understand why. It's the human condition. And the next question is, how do we fix it? And whether that's a fix or just an adaptation, you begin to recognize that, the continuous long-term growth, we want to look for the right thing for where we are right now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. I do remember that. We're not talking as much, it's more of a Gen Z conversation now versus the millennials, 10 years ago. But I think, that makes a ton of sense. Chad, for you, what was your kind of first experience or your first forte into motivational intelligence? How did you kind of come to find out about it? What set you on the journey?
So I'll be 45 this year, which sounds odd to say. But looking back, I've been studying leadership for almost 22 years now. At the age of 23, I had the opportunity to get around some very successful business owners, and they became my mentors and coaches. And there was something different about them. There was something unique, and they thought different. It wasn't just what they did, but it was how they thought. And at that point, they started to teach me the power of a positive mental attitude and how you approach things and your mindset. So I had coaching about mindset for a long time. And then when Doug came to me, whatever year that was, 2016, 2017, we're not really sure. And he's like, hey, I'm going to go to New York and I'm going to check out this group and I want you to go with me. And of course, I was all in. And then when we spent those 2 days there, I thought, first of all, these are my people. These are the concepts that I love. And I remember coming back and our CEO at the time asked me, he's like, okay, what were your thoughts? And what is it that is so unique about this? And first of all, I said, number one, you just have to, it's kind of one of those things like you have to experience it. I'm not going to be able to explain it to you. However, what is going to set this apart from everything we've had so far is when I came to the organization, it was very much focused on management. And I said, this goes way beyond management. This is leadership. Gets to the root of what drives people and what holds people back. And I think another thing about the timing was we had, as an organization, had started to develop a leadership academy. And it's a 3-year course. And the organization was figuring out we needed more in order to coach and develop our future leaders, because what we had experienced was a little bit of that pain of we had people that were good producers. Spot became open. They were promoted to a manager and they still had that producer's mindset. And we really had to help coach people on how to lead. And that was where the formal term that I had learned, motivational intelligence, not just a positive mental attitude, but really getting into the science behind it. That was really whenever all of that started coming around. And I think it was just a great time for the organization because they were looking for those types of things. And it was just a great match.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you even went the personal side too. I think it was an experience I had for sure. I think, hopefully most people do. We ask people who's ever had a special leader in their lives. And I think, you kind of have this sense. I remember the first time I met our CEO, Joe, and it was kind of a similar sense. There's something different about this guy. Like there's something different about these people. And I couldn't really put my finger on it, couldn't really articulate it because it never really had been explained to me. But it's just kind of this intuitive sense that you have about them. And I think that's, what you notice about great leaders, to your point, versus managers. Managers will tell you what to do and how to do it all day long. But there's something different that you sense about great leaders. And it impacts, people personally. It impacts, what Doug and we'll talk more about, the culture. That's really where a lot of that is built. So I'm glad you went there. John, what do you remember about, so these guys came, we're flirting with a decade ago now. They flew to New York. What do you remember most about, about meeting these gents for the first time?
Yeah, well, first of all, Chad said it really well. I mean, you recognize people that think like you very quickly. You recognize people that hold the same values as you very quickly because like calls to like. And you recognize it very quickly. So I would agree with Chad. I realized that we're on the same mental game page. These guys get it. And what else was really, really impressive is they had a big want to. They wanted to help their coworkers, their colleagues. They wanted to elevate the company culture. They wanted to pivot the business and do other things. And that's a big want to. And they were looking for the how to. Another thing that resonated was they realized they didn't have all the specialized knowledge themselves, that they had to go looking for specialists. And of course, 2 Logical has been, paying attention and researching this and practicing it for over 30 years. But there was something else that really resonated and said, this is an organization that we've been looking for to partner with and want to help them in any way we can. The founder of the organization was a guy by the name of Bill Cooper. And he had a famous affirmation catchphrase saying, and it was, go find another mountain. Obviously that's metaphorical, but it's about goal direction. And it's about finding something bigger, better, more difficult, more impactful after you've completed what you're on now. And it was like, I'm going, oh my God, that's just 4 words. Since the 3 of you know me pretty well, I could talk for half a day just about those 4 words, but it's compelling. It's into the future. And, as most people know, we have a belief at 2 Logical that our best is in our future because we have this amazing ability to get better day over day, week over week, month over month, quarter over quarter. This is born to all. And most people overlook or ignore or deny that fact. And, everything starts out as a thought. And then what we do with that thought, whether it's optimal or less, it doesn't matter. Whatever we focus on, whatever we allow to dominate our mind becomes our reality. And we get to pick what dominates our mind. They were interested early and often, and still are, on the foundation, not on the symptoms, not on the outcomes, but what starts at the beginning. What comes first? And that's all we look for, is people that want to understand and want to know, how do we bring the best out of ourselves? How do we bring the best out of others? So pretty quickly, it was a hand in glove fit, and it's been ever since.
Yeah. No, I mean, you've always spoke so highly of these guys, and I've been excited to have this conversation and get to know them a little bit better, because, yeah, I mean, to Chad's point, when you kind of find your people, and so that is something that I think you've said about them. That's something that I think just philosophically as an organization, we do look to, if we're going to partner together, let's do this to be the best. Let's do this to really grow. Let's do this the best. We're not really interested in doing this just to check a box. And, those aren't really our people. Let's actually do this to be the best and actually grow people and actually make a difference. And if you're on board with that, then you're our people. And if you're not, then you're probably not our people. And you might be a little uncomfortable around us. But I think that's a great sense, and maybe even a good segue into the next part of our conversation, which I wanted to talk about. Chad, I want to go to you first, because you mentioned, sitting through the class the first time, you were kind of exposed to this, you sensed, it really resonated. These are my people, these are my concepts. So I'm curious for you, was there something in particular, what resonated with you so much? Why do you feel like it resonated? Was there anything in particular that stuck out through as a concept in general that you really kind of latched onto?
It's funny you say that, because I hadn't thought about that until right now when you asked, but I remember two very specific things on the very first day that Doug and I were there. And it had been probably 10 years or so, 12 years since I had heard anyone talk about the book Think and Grow Rich. And I was like, okay, here we go. And then Dave, I believe it was, he said, the speed of the group is determined by the speed of the leader. And that was something that my mentor had taught me many years ago. And just from that point on, and talking about the thoughts and the beliefs, and not talking about how to have a difficult conversation with somebody that you manage, not talking about just the management principles, but truly getting down to the self-leadership. Because that's the very first step. We have to learn how to lead ourselves before we can lead other people. And whenever it started really digging into that, I knew right away that even if the organization wasn't going to do anything, I'm like, I am soaking all this up, because this speaks to me. And that's why, just like John was saying, it was the want to. I think Doug and I just came back and we were so energized and so excited that I don't think the executive management had a choice but to look at. We were drinking the Kool-Aid, waving the flag, whatever you want. It was like, this is the real deal. I mean, this is what we need.
Well, you guys are pretty good internal salespeople too, external as well as internal. You guys can sell ideas, you can sell intangibles, you can sell financial products and services, but you only do it when you know that you can help them fill a need or overcome a challenge. And that's the only time we partner in sales. And so selling internally or externally is the same, but you guys are pretty influential. Give yourself a little pat on the back for that. But I love how you said, I don't think the executives had a choice. Because you were willing to stake your reputation. I think that this is what we need. We know this is going to close the gap. Let's do it. It's on us. Blame us if it doesn't work. Yeah.
I think Doug, Chad and I are both students of life, and we've been exposed to a lot of different people through different careers. And I started my career in higher education and at the college level and teaching folks a specific skill. Then I moved into the nonprofit world, where my job was to build off of the leadership of a board of directors, and I got to see great people. And then I came into this workforce development job, and, trying to identify which leadership or management skills, techniques we needed to teach people. That would have been an easy choice. You can find any number of books about the different techniques, but my challenge, because I'm a little analytical and I like to have a very systemic approach, why would I invest the time and energy teaching techniques if I don't have the right common foundation that those techniques will truly be useful for somebody to implement? And as we're talking, Chad brought up our high potential leadership program. We have people coming from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds, all different thought processes, who, if we taught those techniques, we can't guarantee that they're going to be deployed in the right way. And that's any team, not just here. And so by really getting to that individual contributor, individual mindset, self-leadership, and building from that foundation, everything else we do is going to be more efficient and more effective. And the bonus really for us, outside of the job, is we get to learn every time with the people who are in the class. And hopefully not only have we done our job in the company, but, the law of, service and reciprocity, we got such a great gift by having the mental models from Two Logical simplify things that we already knew but were intangible. We have no choice, but from a reciprocity standpoint, to share that with the people we work with and that we care about, because that's what, humanity is all about, right? Beyond the job. And that's kind of the call that once you know it, you can't help but evangelize it because it made your life better. And I think that's a really big gift that we get in our role, working with you guys, working with the people we work with every day, and also thinking back to the people that shaped us along the way.
Yeah, I think that's 100% true. I think, it is, I'm glad you went to, law of service, law of reciprocity, that the only way to get what we want is to help other people get what they want. And we kind of feel that when we've been helped as well. It's the whole thing. You're walking into the office building and there's the double doors. Somebody opens the door for you. You get to the next set of doors. What are you going to do? You're going to open it for the next person. You feel this compulsion to pass it on, especially if it's something that has helped you personally. So Doug, for you, since you went there, what has it done for you personally? You said it helped you personally. Just, either was that in your personal life? Was that just as a leader, as an executive? What was it that stuck or resonated with you or was impactful for you just as a human being?
Yeah, this question's a hard one to answer because I could go back, pretend this is a psychologist's couch and go back decades, But for me, in a personal journey, in a family journey, in a career journey, the root of everything is up here. And, having studied, or for personal reasons, things like Joyce Meyer, Battlefield of the Mind, or, you talk about Napoleon Hill and some of those things, you begin to get bits and pieces, but there are certain magic times when they all come together. And so for me, I think the specific, one of the core values, one of the motivational intelligence principles that's been most impactful is resilience, because having studied leadership, one of the big components is strengths-based leadership. And we hear, and I still believe there's value in it, that you take those strengths that you've built up over time, whether just through nature or nurture, the lifelong leadership debate, right? You come to the table with certain strengths and that you should maximize those and choose to opt out of areas where you're not strong because it's not efficient. Be an excellentist at what you do and let other people be excellentists in their own area. But I think there's risk with that too, because then when you're challenged for that comfort zone, you might opt out easier. You might say, oh, maybe this company's not for me because something's changed and it's time for me to go look elsewhere. You may look at an opportunity or a challenge that you're facing and react differently than you could have, than looking at it through a lens of resilience. For me personally, that's been one of the biggest growth lessons, to ask myself the question, how am I looking at the situation? And is this a time where I need to draw on resilience and challenge versus kind of that strengths-based approach?
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. To your point, so often, I think if we're not careful, we fall into the strengths and let me focus on what I'm really good at and opt out of the other things. Part of the risk of that is we end up putting ourselves in a box. I'm good at this, but I'm not good at that. And with anything that we do, that it makes us susceptible to, okay, maybe 90% of this is the same, but this one little thing changed, and so I'm out. I'm just throwing up my arms and I'm out of here. And this just clearly isn't for me because it's not coming easy. And I think that's a thing that is really easy for any, just as a human being, to slip into that feeling. Were there particular moments for you where you felt you've maybe addressed some things differently with that kind of mindset around resilience? Anything specific come to mind, or things that you look back on and maybe I did this really well, or maybe I wanted to think about this a little bit differently?
I think for me, a lot of it comes down to how I deal with relationships with other people, both personally and professionally. I have a bit of a personality style, if you want to say it that way, that is probably going to analyze everything 6 ways from Sunday and study it before I ever bring it up to you. So by the time I'm ready to talk to you about it, I'm pretty confident in what I'm saying. And sometimes that's not the approach in a relationship, whether professional or personal. And so, you kind of have to pause a little bit and think, I'm not going to throw this relationship out with the bathwater because we hit what felt like an impasse. I may have to adapt my approach. Even if I don't adapt my approach and the response isn't what I want, you don't throw it away because the relationship's more important and the shared goals are more important and you go back to those shared values. You just figure out a new approach, but you got to choose to do it. And that takes some humility and some energy and some commitment to kind of look in the mirror and say, all right, how are we going to approach this next one? Not one specific, but I would say it's mainly in terms of how you manage relationships with people.
Well, and I'm going to jump in here for a second because, Doug has presented himself as an analytical thinker, get together and analyze and prepare and all that, which is clearly one of his strengths. But Doug's also an artist. He's a musician. He's a dancer. He's an actor. So he's got both sides covered. And I think one of the best things that we share a kindred spirit at least in the mindset, is that recognizing the fact that every strength that we now have was once a weakness. So, everything that we're good at doing now, we used to suck at. And then we became resilient and we never gave up on it. And eventually we became a master, just like learning how to walk or talk, ride a bike, whatever. But what many people get, I guess, bound up in is thinking that, oh, these are my strengths, I just got to leverage my strengths, instead of working on some of their weak areas. And with the pace of change being so rapid, everybody's going to have to change and develop new skills as well as attitudes. But just recognizing the fact, and I believe everybody is good at turning a weakness into a strength, because every strength they have currently once was a weakness. So we believe it's too logical, and I know Doug and Chad believe this as well, is that everybody has not only greatness inside of them, they've already exhibited it. They've already done a lot of the basic fundamentals of success, like turning a weakness into a strength. And we've done it many, many, many times. So most people are really good at things they don't think they're good at, just like change. I hate change. I figure something out and I change it right away. Yeah, but in your hobby, you are a change agent. You are reading on your discretionary time. You're getting coaching. You're taking feedback and making adjustments. You're practicing. You're buying the latest technology in your hobby. So they are actually pushing the envelope. So that, to me, is not a change resistor. That's a change agent. Everybody's got it in them.
It's interesting, John, when you talk about some of the strengths-based leadership, it kind of takes me back to this piece of advice that somebody gave me years ago, Amy in the print shop at one of my first jobs. And she looked at me and she said, Doug, you can have it good, fast, or you can have it cheap. You can have any two, but you can't have three. And so when you think about, the whole concept of using your strengths and avoiding the weaknesses, that's looking at speed, between fast, good, and cheap. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's times when you need to maximize the strength and avoid the weakness. But from a quality standpoint, and you look at our lives and our careers and longevity, sometimes you can't look at it through the lens of speed. You've got to look at it through quality and also the human cost, humility, and time to get better. Because then that time gets reduced in the future because you now have a new strength. So the two ideas, I think, can live together when it comes to leadership. It's just knowing when you've got to shift that focus a little bit. I'm glad you made me think back to that really good lesson. I've carried it with me for years.
Yeah.
Shout out Amy at the print shop.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love it. Here's 3. Pick 2. That's all you got. I can give you any 2. I love it. And Chad is our expert sales executive. I believe that's an alternate choice close or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you bet. And just to kind of piggyback on that, for years, we've been in environments where people have taken personality tests and strength finders and things like that. And what I have seen is people will start to use those, what is on the survey scientifically proven as your weakness, and they'll use it as a crutch. And they'll see that, oh, well, okay, see, I'm an introvert, so therefore I'm not good with people. And they hold on to that. And on mine, I've become known for a long time, I have a black heart. And on one of the surveys that I took, okay, there was like 100 different traits. And your strongest was ranked with 100, and your weakest was ranked with something. Everyone else in the class, their weakest trait was typically around like 34 to maybe 40. So they at least got 30% of the 100. I got a 0 on empathy. It said you have 0 empathy at all. So I could have used that as a crutch and just plowed my way through life and just scorched earth and didn't care who I mowed over in my way. And unfortunately, Doug has experienced a little bit of that as I have grown and matured. But with the concept of the unlimited mindset, and we can continue to get better every day. And with those affirmations, I can either have an affirmation that says, hey, the survey told me I can be a jerk because I've got 0 empathy. Or I can say, you know what, I'm working to be more empathetic every day. And I use that in those situations, to start to think about other people's perspective. So just a little personal example of how, instead of using it as a crutch, you can use it to get better every day.
Also, I'm glad you went there. I think that's a perfect example. It's something that, we see all the time, and there can be, helpful, the personality tests and things like that. They can be helpful as tools, but I think the downfall is exactly what you just said. That, this tells you, maybe it gives you a snapshot of a picture of who that person is at that moment in time. And maybe it's not even that accurate of a picture. Like, even that, I can't imagine your empathy was a 0. But even if it is,
emotional path, okay?
But even if it is, an accurate picture of that person, that person at that moment in time, it doesn't mean that's who that person is destined to be for the rest of their life. And I think that was one thing I remember talking to Joe, our CEO, about at some point, when I first kind of came into the organization, just getting his thoughts on, the personality test, because they seem so popular. And, one of the things he said, Sean, I'm much less interested, when it comes to these personality tests, I'm much less interested in what that says and who that person is right now. I'm much more interested in who do they want to become. And if they want to become the person that I want in this organization, they want to become a better leader, they want to become a better salesperson, they want to become a better father or spouse or friend or whatever it is, I want to work with that person. I don't really care what the personality test says about them right now. I care who they want to become. They don't want to become that. It could say that they're all these great things, but if they're not looking to improve, I don't really have a whole lot of interest in working with that person. And I think it goes, John said before, it's in the want to, we discover the how to. But I think when we look at these things as, these personality tests, or, and there's a lot of different examples of them, it's this snapshot in this moment in time, it's going under this assumption that we're looking at human beings as static, that we can't grow and improve, that you are who you are, and that's the end of the ball game. And it's such a, I think, boring way to look at life. I mean, I don't want to be the same person at 18 that I am now, and I don't want to be the same person now that I am at 50. Why would you want that? But I think we a lot of times get tricked into it. So I'm glad you went there. Chad, you brought up, I'm curious, when was the first time you read Think and Grow Rich? Because you brought it up. You've obviously you read it before.
Yeah, that was probably 2003. 2004, and that was really whenever I started working on mindset and working on my thoughts and beliefs and how I perceived things. And really, Doug was talking about resilience, and I would say out of all of the concepts that we get to teach and we get to share, just the actual definition of motivational intelligence, the ability to identify and manage those thoughts and beliefs, that was huge for me. And I tell a story whenever I get the chance to teach the class that my mentor was having a meeting in Chicago. I lived in St. Louis at the time, and he invited me up to Chicago for the opportunity to get around some very, very successful business people. And I drove from St. Louis to Chicago, and it was about 5 hours in the pouring rain. It was just a downpour the whole time. And if you've ever driven in Illinois in the rain, it's quite an experience. And I get to this meeting, and he's so excited to see me, and he comes up and gives me a big hug, and he's like, "Man, how are you? It's so good to see you." And I said, "Man, it rained for 5 hours. Like, it was a brutal drive. And he stood there for a second and he looked at me and he goes, Chad, he said, I want to tell you something. He said, successful people have a positive mental attitude. And he said, it's not that they don't have bad things happen to them. They just focus on the positive. He said, you've got an amazing opportunity to be around all of these successful people tonight. And I was so excited to see you. And the first thing out of your mouth was a negative comment. He said, a positive mental attitude is probably something you need to work on. And he turned around and walked away. And it shocked me. I didn't hear anything anybody said for the rest of the night because I was reeling from it. But what he did is he defined that, first of all, you have to identify that these thoughts are negative. And that's one of the things that I've seen over the past couple of years of talking to people and teaching these concepts is that a lot of times people just need that time to take a step back and be like, I am kind of really reacting kind of negative to this. And so you have to identify it and then you learn to manage it. And I think for me, out of all of this, just the concept of motivational intelligence and looking at everything as an opportunity. And over the past several years, I've gone through some pretty tough times in life, some pretty dark periods. And as Doug said something at lunch a couple weeks ago, and he's like, can you imagine going through the things that we've gone through and not having this training? And I mean, just that just changed my perspective. And I was like, that's why we have to continue to share and teach this, because we don't want people to go through these experiences and not have this training.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. It's as much preventative as it is prescriptive. To fix the things that are going on now, it's as much setting you in the foundation for the future as it is fixing the things that are going wrong right now. Because, I mean, that's the kind of world we live in, that you don't really know what's going to happen next week, less so now probably than at any point before, and it's only going to get more so that way. But Chad, I'm curious for you. I love that story. One of your mentors kind of calling you out a little bit, and you said you're reeling the rest of the night. I've been in that spot too, just conversations where I get called out on something, and man, the wheels start spinning. So I'm curious, what was it like for you? You said you were kind of reeling the rest of the night. I know for me, at certain times that's happened, I've really wrestled with it, because I think it's really easy, and the reason I go there is because it's really easy to we can hear a story like that and think it's all of a sudden, like a light bulb switch. And it was just, I immediately started thinking differently. And, it's not usually how it works. There's usually kind of this tug of war going on in our head, and we're wrestling with it because we're comfortable with where we are now and how we're looking at things. So what was the aftermath like for you? What was it like as you were kind of wrestling that in your mind?
I was stewing and having my own pity party. I was like, who is this guy to call me out? But then as I started to think about it, it took me back to a conversation that he and I had early on, because he said he had the be, do, have conversation with me. Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? And what are the goals? What are the things that you want to have? So I kind of laid it out and we worked on a plan, and he said, that's fantastic. And he said, as your coach and as your mentor, I can help you to get there. But he said, I'm going to ask permission. If I see you doing anything along the path that will keep you from getting to those goals, or that will hurt your progress along the way, do I have permission to speak into your life and correct you? And at the time I was like, shoot, yeah, definitely. It was easy to give that permission. Only whenever he actually took that opportunity, I was like, well, it hurt, and that's what we always talk about, growth. I think sometimes we forget that growth, there's pain in growth. There's stretching and growth. And that was that opportunity. And I had to kind of reel on it and look back and say, you know what? Yeah, did it hurt? Definitely. But he was totally right. And I had given him that permission, because that's the thing about blind spots is we can't see them. And it's the things that we do that everyone else sees. And I didn't realize that I'd become cynical. I didn't realize that, because, was it a fact that it had rained for 5 hours? Yes, it was a fact. But again, just because it's a fact doesn't mean something needs to get promoted. It doesn't need to be ruminated on and talked about and thought about all the time. And that's what he was trying to get me to understand, is that, yeah, it happened, but look at all the good opportunities that you have ahead of you. And if you sit here and just continue to think about how bad the drive was, you're going to miss all of this. And that was the thing, that I had given him that permission, and he had my best interest in mind. He wasn't saying any of that out of spite or to hurt me. It was actually to help me.
Yeah. Well, and there was a level of trust there too. I think that's such an important piece of it is, if it was some guy off the street, you probably would have had a few choice words with him and moved on with your life.
Right.
But it was the fact that, he had invested in you. He had that, the conversation of, what do you want to accomplish? Where do you want to go? Who do you want to be?
You bet.
And the willingness to invest on his part is what made you open to the feedback. I think that's such an important thing from a leadership perspective to recognize. And I think we all probably had that just, ourselves when in, different situations with people that needed to point some things out to us that we probably didn't like to hear. And, I know for me, Joe's done that plenty of times, that you don't like to hear it. It doesn't feel good. You start going down the whole list of this is a fact and, what does he know? And all the things that, all the excuses as to why I don't need to listen to this and I'm fine and I was right and he was wrong. And, one of the biggest things that has pulled me out of it, it sounds like for you too, is the fact that, man, this guy's invested a lot of time in me. He's really shown that he actually cares about me. So if he's saying this, like, maybe I do need to take a beat and second and actually listen to what he's saying. But I think it's the thing that, gets skipped over so easily, so quickly. From a leadership perspective, we think, oh, we could just, point this out to somebody and then that'll be it. They should just listen to me. And that's, never how it works.
What's interesting, Chad, as you talk about, the gentleman that gave you the feedback and he spoke kind of a new life into you by challenging you. I think a lot of the people we work with, we're fighting people who didn't speak that unlimited mindset into them at a very, very early point in life, so early that they don't remember it. And the habits and the things that they, and I say they, but I'm also going to say that I do, it takes a long time to take those lessons back and really own the fact that you have all the opportunities in front of you if you choose to change. I go back and I think about a limited mindset early on, whether it was because I was an overweight kid with odd hobbies and whatever the case may be. I had some soundtracks in my head that I created habits to compensate for those, and it may take years of hearing a lot of these lessons that we talk about to really unpack the bits and pieces and get comfortable owning where you are. And, for those of us as leaders of other people, we got to think about the fact that the folks sitting in front of us, it may be a long journey to help them have that identification. We may be helping them uncover things that they don't even remember. And, obviously we're not psychologists, but I think a lot of it is doctoring ourselves, if we're open to it, to begin thinking back and recognizing that maybe what we thought in the past isn't what we have to choose moving forward. And that's a very personal thing, kind of in a corporate setting. It's just where my mind went as you're describing the positive person coming into your life, but also thinking about the folks that we're managing and leading. We may be fighting the not positive person who is long gone.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it.
The world needs critical thinkers, and it's like they're going extinct. We're being told more and more what to think, what to believe, how to interpret things, and let somebody else do it for us. Our own way of looking at things, the ability to have a daily reflection habit, just at the end of the day, slow down, get still and say, hey, what did I do well today? What didn't I do well today or avoid? What can I do better tomorrow? I mean, that's one of the healthiest habits. It takes less than 5 minutes, and it should be part of our daily routine. It's less than 1% of our day. Just slowing down. They used to do that all the time, like before electricity, because that's what you did. And you were better at writing, and you were better at thinking and planning, and you kept a journal. These great, great habits are going away, and we're having less and less critical thinkers, and we're having more and more groupthink. I think every organization needs more critical thinkers because they don't have very many. And we have to be able to not only challenge our own thinking, but challenge the thinking that's coming from the masses or whatever. But it's less and less. And, a lot of people in the United States realize that or are starting to. So hopefully there's going to be a sea change. But that's what leaders do. They teach critical thinking. They ask a lot of questions. They draw out people's ideas and then challenge them back or refine them. And there's less and less of this going on. And that's why it's always been a privilege to work with First State and you guys, and your entire culture is built on that now. And it's the norm. It's what's so rare in other organizations is so common in yours, and you guys don't even realize it.
to your point, John, and to your point, Doug, I think, the spaced repetition of these things is so important for us to keep in mind, that it's not a one-time thing, that it is, we need to, for ourselves, just because we go out into the world and the world is going to tell us a lot of things, that a lot of reasons why we can't, a lot of reasons why we shouldn't, a lot of reasons why it's not possible. And then just from a leadership perspective, it's the same thing. And I love the way you put it, Doug. You kind of are battling maybe a lot of shadow warriors or demons inside this person's mind that they're not even there anymore, but they planted some seed 10 years ago that got them to think this way. And it's not a flip of a switch. That's why, we reel and we wrestle. And it's exactly what Chad said, that you start going down this path of they don't really know what they're talking about. And it might happen, might happen in one conversation. It might happen over several conversations or over the course of years, that you continually start to chip away and improve. And it is kind of the slow way is the fast way, because, yes, does that take investment and does that take time? Absolutely. But what's possible on the other side is, not even comparable to if we're just sitting still and being static. But it requires, a lot of patience and a lot of spaced repetition. It's one of the biggest reasons that we developed Mojo just internally, first just to use it for ourselves, but from an organizational perspective, you need to have these conversations over and over and over again. We were doing it at lunch today. It's not enough to hear it just once. I've been here for 10 years and I still listen to this stuff, and we have these conversations. And your level of awareness and your understanding of the same things, the same words, evolve so much over time based on who you are and where you want to go. It's a totally different thing and a totally different perspective. But I remember, I think it was Dave was talking about, this is an analogy Joe had used. He used the analogy of the horse whisperer, if you've ever seen the movie, which I haven't, but I've heard great things. Joe had immediately told me I had to watch this movie. But, it was this guy who was taming a wild horse, and, he was trying to ride it and kept getting bucked off, hop back on and kept getting bucked off, hop back on and kept getting bucked off. And so eventually the horse whisperer just goes into the corner of the pen and sits. And, the horse is running around and getting all crazy, and he just, sits patiently waiting for the horse to kind of calm down. And eventually the horse starts to slow down and then makes his way back over to the horse whisperer, and then he gets on and, he rides away. And Joe, Dave had told this story that he said, Joe and I were talking, and he's like, that is a lot of times my relationship with you. If I introduce a new idea to you, you buck me off, immediately, or you resist it and you wrestle with it, and, I'll try again and you'll wrestle with it. And I'll try a couple times. And then after a while, just kind of have to be patient and wait for you to work through it in your mind. And then eventually when you're ready, you come back around. But it is the importance of the spaced repetition, because these things aren't a moment in time. It is an evolution of an understanding that, it's not just a straight knowledge transfer, which makes it so different, but so much more powerful, I think, in so many regards. So I love that example, Doug. I want to dive into maybe some organizational stuff if you guys are cool with it. I know one of the things that, we alluded to and talked about a little bit early on, Doug, was looking at and maybe kind of reworking the company values and really how you went about and simplified those. If you don't mind, what was kind of the impetus for that? What did it look like before? What did it look like after? Why did you kind of go down that path to develop and really start to think about the company values?
Sure. After we went through the trial course and brought our executives and things into that, the 5 motivational intelligence principles were so powerful. And the question came up, if this is truly the core that we want to recruit for, to develop our existing employees to have the things we want to nurture, they have to have a place of importance and visibility. And I think I shared that we had a real commitment to the concept of values. And we had a list of 14 different behaviors, all of which were very good. Things that I would go looking back, say, demonstrated or were ways to demonstrate a lot of the motivational intelligence principles. But to figure out how do we simplify that list, but also how do we really get to the bullseye of what's going to drive not only people to engage in those 14 things, but to engage in things beyond that. How's it going to engage between a manager to an employee? There's so many other possible outcomes when you're focusing on those 5 core principles. So we looked at those 5 principles we also looked at our other core values to say what was uniquely First State, not only from a culture perspective, like the dominant thoughts and beliefs, but also climate perspective, how we interact with our customers, with each other, those things that were uniquely part of our internal and external brand. And there were two other elements that fit into that mix, and they were professionalism and service. So for us, going around and talking to employees at all levels and asking questions about what people valued and what their response was to some of these concepts, there was a real easy buy-in, if you will, to those motivational intelligence principles, along with professionalism and service. So we maintained a couple of those elements that were uniquely First State, but also then overlaid or transitioned out the behavioral values with those thoughts and beliefs values from motivational intelligence. So we had about a 6-month window, a pretty short window actually, to build that campaign internally and plan for that launch. And it was a wild ride, but it was a great ride that had buy-in at all levels. And then we just had the really cool opportunity to be able to communicate it out. And so, we had a number of our leaders who went through the Leading with Motivational Intelligence course. We did some, I would call it Leading with Motivational Intelligence Light courses for some of our managers across the organization. We have about 500 individual contributors, 200 folks who have management authority over one or more people from a role perspective. We did some of that advanced education. And then we really launched what I would call a pride campaign internally, because we were very proud of not only what we were adopting, but our history. And so we had a pretty awesome video that was put together that told the story of both our vision and our mission and how our values supported that. Because through that process, we actually revised our vision and mission statement, because those three components, are so core and intertwined. The vision talks about your why, the mission talks about your how, and to be able to do that how and why, you really have to have core principles going into that. So from that point, those things have become the foundation of pretty much every educational campaign that we lead, whether it's our new employee accelerate program, whether it's our manager certification where we bring people in to teach them. Really from the beginning level, the first thing people have to learn is why we exist, how we do what we do, and what we do. And then we talk about the things we have to believe to make that happen. Our vision, we grow stronger communities by helping people and organizations achieve and protect financial success. And we have to rally people around that cause, that by helping create the financial infrastructure in our communities, we help people. And that's important. It's not just what you do, whether you're in a transactional role or an administrative technical role, or whether you're, maintaining our facilities. All of those things lead up to that larger, greater purpose. And the way that we show up to be our best as members of that team, rallying toward that cause, is by believing, living, demonstrating those core values. So it's ultimately infiltrated most everything that we do, whether it's performance management, training, conversations and meetings. It's exciting to be in an organization where you can take the corporate strategy and the values, and they're not in a binder on a shelf until next year, but they get to be pervasive as part of the conversation. So there's a little bit about how we did the short term, but then some of the things that we've continued to do to keep it alive.
Well, and let me just jump in right now, because what they did is they took a 3-ring binder that stayed on a shelf, and they made this. You can see it behind Doug's right shoulder. There's a 1-sentence vision statement. Doug gave it 1-sentence mission statement, and then 7 values and 1 sentence underneath each of them. I mean, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Da Vinci said it, Steve Jobs said it, and this is for the employees. And it says, because of you at the bottom. And I've seen a lot of attempts at this. I've never seen anything better. And the transition, the pivot, the whole culture was transformed because of this document and the work that the team did. But now people love it. And they probably don't even remember what came before. And managers are drawing examples in their staff meetings to their employees exhibiting these behaviors. And I don't know, in both Chad and Doug, as you've seen this take root and new people come in, especially if they've worked elsewhere where there is nothing like that, and there's a lot of finger pointing and department silos and all of that, it's got to be a breath of fresh air. I mean, it's still as exciting and exuberant and exhilarating as it was when it was first announced. I mean, does it still have a life of its own, and it's, gone in a lot of different shapes and formations?
I get to live it every day because part of my responsibility is to drive it. And when I hear stories about people whose lives are better because of something that they just happen to get because they work here, there can't be anything better for me personally. When we talk about things like, adaptability, or we talk about courage, which is, by the way, my favorite definition on that sheet to present on, and people start recognizing that it's not only a work value, but a human value that matters, there couldn't be anything more energizing for me. Chad,
Well, let me jump in. And for the listeners to the podcast, I want to give the great definition that Doug just referenced. Courage. The ability, and it doesn't even say the ability, manage personal discomfort and choose appropriate actions in the face of new, unpredictable, or challenging situations. I mean, that's such a powerful statement, and it really speaks to the heart of the matter that many people feel each and every workday. They feel that discomfort. And as, of course, all of us know on this, having butterflies is a good thing. It means we're about to grow. This is actually a good thing. Personal discomfort, when we feel like we're outside of our comfort zone, that means we're going to learn. We can't learn inside of our comfort zone. We can only learn when we feel uncomfortable. So it's actually a good thing. So they have taken the path of rebranding what many see as discomfort. And now they start to see it as, I should seek that out. I should have butterflies every day. I better feel uncomfortable today or I won't learn anything. That's now the affirmations and the thinking in many of the employees at the organization.
Well,
Chad
I want to go to Chad quick, but Doug, I'm curious, you said that's your favorite one to talk about and present on. Why is it your favorite?
Vulnerability moment. Looking back, I would say that's probably where my own self-talk was the most negative, that I didn't view myself as a courageous person. And this goes way back. In the work we do, I think we tend to think about emergency medical professionals, firefighters, police officers, Superman or woman in a costume. That's what courage is. But when you start to break it down, how many times do we choose behaviors based on fear and a fear response that really limit our future? And I think for myself, looking back over the years, I listened to the physical response. And this is when I teach it is so fun to talk about, because we talk about what are the physical things that happen when you feel fear. And obviously we start getting into a lot of biology, and that's not what you expect to talk about in a financial institution. But we talk about how the physical response is biological, but it hasn't caught up to where we are today in our world, because we're responding to the saber-toothed tiger. But what are our saber-toothed tigers? And people talk about speaking in front of audiences. They talk about having a difficult conversation with a spouse. And they begin to think about, I can separate the physical response, which is actually a good thing because it tells me I'm in danger and I need to protect myself, but it doesn't mean I have to limit my next steps because of it. I can't assume that just because my body reacts the same way to speaking in front of an audience as it does to being faced with a deadly animal, I have to realize what the threat level is and make a choice. Because if I make the wrong one, it's going to have other negative consequences. And, looking back in my own life, I think there are times when I listened to that biological response and interpreted it to be something so much bigger than it really was and missed opportunities. I'm still not going to tell you that it feels good and that I'm excited about it. It takes all the reframing in the world for me to talk to myself. But, what do you always talk about, John? We're the only species that is able to think about what we think about. And, we have to use that gift that we have. And it's just such a powerful, fun one to talk about.
Yeah, no, it is. It is always interesting. I love having these conversations because, one, I mean, I agree with everything you said, and it is a fundamental thing that, people that break out to the next level or they're successful in any area, they view fear differently. People that are limited by it, they are controlled by their fear versus those that aren't, are doing the controlling. They maybe feel the physical reaction, but they don't let that determine what it is that they're going to do next. But I love hearing you talk about that. And I think that's the interesting thing of having these conversations and going into different organizations. And you've probably even seen this yourselves, just putting this in place with a lot of the employees. Is it's always so interesting how different parts of this resonate differently with different people. And it is very much a thing where everybody has their own, this is what Joe always said, would always tell me, and still does, everybody has their own unique combination. Based on who they are at that moment in time and the experiences they came and how they frame different things in their head, there are different things that have held people back. There are different things that have been the reason that they've succeeded. And so it is always an interesting thing having these conversations is, what resonates, what resonates with one person is going to be different than what resonates with another. But, you can have a lot of these things lined up. It only takes one to be a major hindrance and hold you back. And what that one thing is might be different for you than it is for me, than it is for John, than it is for Chad. But it's always so interesting to see and hear how much, these different concepts resonate with different people because we all have kind of our own unique experiences. But Chad, I want to go to you. What's kind of been your view and your experience just from a culture perspective?
It's funny to hear, I shouldn't say funny, it's interesting to hear Doug talk about that because I've never heard him teach about that courage, but it is almost verbatim the way that I teach it in the class. Because I have a very, very strong passion for our country and our military. And I have friends in the military. I have one of my best friends is a firefighter. They run into the fire. They run into the battle. And this is when we get to that part of the class, this is what I say. I say, we always associate courage with those people, and not to take anything away from them, but I don't think we give ourselves enough credit when it comes to the courage that it takes to have a difficult conversation with a coworker, or the courage that it takes in any of those situations to where, like you said, we have those feelings. And it's interesting that you describe it that way because that's exactly how I teach it. And I think this single page document has really, really accelerated the growth of the organization because you can hire with it, you can coach with it, you can fire with it, you can hold yourself accountable with it. You hold other people accountable with it. And towards I guess probably the third and fourth quarter of last year, Doug and I were kind of on a road show, and we went around to all the different board meetings, and we were highlighting what Doug does and his team with the Accelerate program and what I've had the opportunity to do with kind of coaching the sales program. And we talk about this everywhere we go. And that very first line, we grow stronger communities. Whenever I'm helping people overcome this fear of, I don't like sales. We don't want to be a big bank. We don't do sales. I'm not a people person. I don't want to go on sales calls. I said, if you fully believe that you grow stronger communities, you can go have great conversations with people and look for places to add value. And that's all we do. So I absolutely love it. And the more I teach it, the more I get to apply it myself.
Yeah, it is something I remember the first time I started doing, just on the digital side with Mojo and stuff, I started doing some coaching. And I remember after the first one that I ran, I talked to Joe and he said, how'd it go? And I was like, I was just amazed, what the response was and how the conversation went and what people's takeaways were and how personal they got and how vulnerable they were. And he just goes, oh yeah, you're going to be addicted to this. And it very much is. I'm sure you've had that experience too. It very much is. When you see the light bulbs go off for people and you see the difference it makes for them personally, professionally. I mean, what else could you ask for? It is something.
And just, not just the one-page document with the vision, mission, and values, but this motivational intelligence course and what I have the opportunity to teach with the sales training. I literally have people on my team and other people in the bank that show up at the beginning of day 2 just to hear the golden nuggets. They come because they want to hear what resonated with people. And it is amazing because, we've had almost 200 people go through the class, and I just finished a class yesterday. And after 200 people, there are still new things that people, for the very first time, I'm hearing people say, oh yeah, this was my golden nugget. I'm like, no one's ever said that before.
Wow.
It was a quote, or it was a little side comment, or, as we're talking about something, it kind of goes down a rabbit hole and someone was like, that changed the game for me right there. And it is amazing how different people at different points in life, I mean, it literally is kind of that whole living document type thing, to where you can go through the class now, you can learn these concepts now, and it's going to apply, and you do it in 12 months and you're in a totally different place in life, and something totally different is going to resonate. So yeah, I literally had people who show up on day 2 just to listen to the class's golden nuggets.
That's very cool. I mean, I get that too. It is so interesting, just with the stuff on my side that I do with Mojo. The conversations I have are 100% golden nuggets, because it's, hey, listen to this, and then we're going to get together and talk about what your golden nuggets were. And it is so interesting, exactly what you said, that you have a group of people, they all listen to the same exact thing, and they come in with such different golden nuggets, different takeaways, the little quote here, or the little story there, or I connected this to this thing that I'm working on professionally, or I connect this thing to raising my kids, or I connected this thing to an experience I had in college. And it is so interesting how, to your point, different the takeaways are, but all so profound. It's not that, any are necessarily better than the other. They're all so unique, but I think part of the reason is that they're meaningful to that person. And so it's such an interesting conversation.
They're meaningful to that person. Also, at the same time, whenever you have a room full of people and they hear other people and the things that really hit them, and you got the guy over here in the corner who's got 25 years of lending experience, who from the outside, super successful, super confident. And his golden nugget was, I realized I struggle with self-confidence a lot. And I realized that my thoughts and beliefs are the things that are holding me back. And you can see everybody in the room like, out of everyone in the room, no one thought you would have said that.
Yeah.
So it just, you can see how that type of thing just raises everyone's confidence. Like, okay, maybe it's not just me.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not just me who deals with this.
There's some really great things we've been able to add value, but I also want to give some credit that the long-term culture that we came into was very much based in just being good people who were humble and vulnerable, because I think that kind of vulnerability-based trust was a really powerful ingredient that allowed us to loft with these concepts more quickly. There's a line that I think it's attributed back to Bill, who you mentioned, John. We take our work very seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And I think that's one of the special elements that's allowed us to systemize these concepts so quickly, because there is a deep level of care for people. And I think a lot of our leadership team talks about how they grew up together in the trenches in building this organization. We've been around for 70 years. And that's a pretty powerful gift that Chad and I were given to be able to add value to. So I definitely want to give some major credit to the history that got us here, and also say, I think there's a lot of organizations out there who are built on some of those same core principles, who could begin to take this great thought process and inject it into their organization and see some amazing things happen really quickly.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, I'm glad that you said that. I think it is interesting. You look at, and I think it's true of most organizations, to your point, that there's, a lot of times a foundation there, especially, you look at the founders of any of these companies, they usually embody, I wouldn't even say usually, they pretty much always embody these values and this way of thinking. That's flat out how they built the company and why they built the company. And it, could be in different industries and different size companies and all the different things, but they all kind of thought this way. And I think that's the challenge a lot of times, just from a succession perspective, is, you see a lot of times as soon as the founder leaves, the company kind of loses its soul. And it's because, they're built around, but, a lot of these principles, but that person leaves and there hasn't been anything systematized and simplified to really make sure that this stays in place. And this is the center point and the heartbeat of the organization.
I grew up in a small family business, and I was very blessed to be around a couple really hardworking parents that work together. But they more or so worked in their business versus on their business. And I think they missed opportunities for scaling. And so I think about today, and, you know, we're about 700 people in our company. We're not huge, but for our area and our region, we're a large company. I would say to any employer, or whether they have somebody in an HR learning and development capacity or not, one of the biggest risk management things that they could do while they're still small that help them prepare to scale is start sooner than later. Because I think a lot of business owners who are that person you're talking about, Sean, they're not thinking from a corporate perspective. They're not thinking about all the stuff you see in books. They're running a great business. But if they want that to last and be a legacy, investing in that early to create the system, to give the language to the principles they're already displaying, that's going to help them exponentially grow and avoid a lot of pitfalls on the way. You know, we could have never predicted, you know, March of 2020, but I thank God every day that from a company perspective, that we had the early stages of this system already in our daily vernacular. I would love to take credit, you know, but no, but the timing for us to be ready to manage through something that was so unpredictable, you couldn't pay for business insurance like that. And I think those challenges are going to continue to come up. But for leaders and companies, don't wait until you think you're big enough for it. Look at it early and say, what can I do to make this part of my people system?
Very well said.
I love that. Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's future-proofing the organization, you know, especially, which is more important now, just with how fast things change. You know, future is here, and you know, it continues to come quickly. So the future-proofing, I think, is huge. Chad, I want to go to you for a second, because one of the other things I wanted to touch on was one of the things that you've done and kind of spearheaded is really kind of embedding creating a sales organization, a sales culture inside the organization. And, you know, just from what I've heard, you know, you talk about and John talk about that previously, and I think is true probably for a lot of, you know, banking, you know, companies in particular, a lot of banks, is there's this tendency to just, you know, hope the phone rings and we'll go off inbound and hopefully they come into the branch, or, you know, they pick up the phone and they call us when they need us, versus going out and actively, you know, selling and building relationships. And that seems to be something that you've kind of overseen and spearheaded, that shift in strategy, that shift in culture. What's that been like for you? What was the impetus of that, and what have you seen, and how have you kind of made that so successful?
Yeah, it's been a fun ride. The fall of, I believe it was 21, during the strategic planning process, our executive management was together, and John Dinkler, our CEO, said that as they were going through the list of projects for 22, he wanted a particular project to kind of take some priority. And he said he wanted to put a team together to create a program that would coach and empower our team members to go out into the markets and to do better at creating those relationships, creating those partnerships. Part of that, he wanted us to formalize a sales call program. And you're right, sales has typically been a bad word that starts with S in banking. So we put together a small team of people, and I naturally jumped to the actions stage of the process. So we got the team together, and I was like, all right, we're going to teach people how to sell. And Doug was the one who's like, is that really the problem that we need to solve? He's like, do we really need to teach people how to sell? And I was like, yeah, that's what they want to do. Let's teach people how to sell. And he's like, what do you think about the whole mindset thing and the thoughts and the beliefs? And that's when the whole table kind of sat back and was like, okay, maybe we need to look at this differently. Maybe we have a different problem that we need to solve. So yeah, it's honestly, it's all Doug who brought John in and said, hey, this is kind of what we're looking to create. You know our organization inside and out. Can you help us build a program that's very much us, that is very much our culture, that will help accomplish this? So we worked for, I don't know, probably 4, 5, 6 months. And thankfully, we had already had that partnership. And John was integral in, look, this is the vision. This is the mission. These are the values. And how can we build a program that completely aligns with this? And it only makes sense that this is the next step. So we kind of put that program together. And that was when John came in and we had kind of a pilot test group with some of the executive management. And it was in that class that John looks at me and he's like, hey, I think you need to get trained to teach this. And I was like, cool. I mean, I can do that, but I'm good with that. So I have a background in sales. I've done all kinds of different business, and it's an amazing opportunity that for the past, whatever it is, 2.5 years, after working with John for several months to get certified to teach this material, and just molding it and evolving it over the past couple of years to really dig into the people's thoughts and the beliefs and to really reframe what people think sales is. Because a lot of times people come in and it is the thoughts and the beliefs, and they think based on negative sales experiences they've had in the past that we're going to ask them to go sell this widget. And this is the widget that we're selling this month, and this is what you're going to get compensated on. But next month, that widget is going to change. So you got to sell a different widget. And that's what people think, that they have to go out and convince other people to buy something that they don't necessarily need and want. But when we go in and we teach them, sales is literally just identifying a need and meeting that need. And if we go back to the vision and the mission and the values and we say, we just want to go have great conversations. And in that great conversation, when you ask great questions, you're not there to do the presentation. You want the customer to do the presentation to you. So you should be the one doing the least amount of talking. And you can see people's mindsets changing. And you can see people, that stress comes off of their shoulders, that they're not going to be forced to just go, hand out brochures and push products and services. We literally want you to go out and build partnerships with people. And the way you build partnerships is by adding value. And the only way you can add value is when you identify a need. And one of the things that has really come up in a lot of these conversations is people are seeing how they can add value, even if it's not with our own products and services. If they say, oh yeah, you're looking for a new accountant? Absolutely. We work with 3 or 4 accountants here in town. Can I help you make that introduction? And they're seeing that just adding that value, that is how you sell.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it's a good point too, that a lot of times, from anything really, particularly from an organizational perspective, but I think it's true from a personal perspective as well, is, are we really addressing what the real problem is? And, and Doug, I think bringing that up, I think was huge, because a lot of companies would go, okay, we need to, put a sales force together, and we need to go, out in the field and sell. So we're just going to teach them how to sell, and they'll go do it. And, we've seen that the movie a million times, that, just because you tell them what to do and how to do it doesn't mean they're actually gonna do it. And, and I think it's particularly true in any sort of a sales role. We changed the go-to-market. We used to do it this way, and now we're doing it this way. So we just got to teach them on how to do it this way, and then they'll go do it.
Yeah.
Very, very rarely, if ever, the case. So what's the response been like, and what's the experience been like for you teaching that to people?
I always like to say, kind of like what Simon Sinek says, you got to ask them. I mean, you got to ask what they think. From my perspective, and maybe Doug can chime in, it's changing. It's changing because people see it differently. And we had a couple people just in the class this week who, before we even got to introductions, in the first 10 minutes, they're like, yeah, I don't like sales. I don't like going to calling people. It's not what I'm here to do.
Brave, very brave person.
Yeah.
You got courage.
Very direct. You could see in 24 hours, you could see the change. And at the end of the second day, they're like, I could do that for sure. Yeah, I could definitely do that, because that makes sense. And again, it gets to, it's not just the sales program. It's just not teaching people the steps of the program. And the story that I use when Doug and I have been going around is that my daughter's 13 and she's in gymnastics. And the most difficult thing for her to get was this back handspring. And if you look at how things go with our thoughts and the beliefs and the actions and skills, she didn't need to get any stronger. She didn't need any more skills. She had everything it took. But whenever she was upside down and backwards, you could see when the fear and doubt crept in, and she bailed out. So it was the thoughts and the beliefs. She had to believe that she could do it. And when I tell that story, people are like, oh, well, that's cute. Good for your daughter. And I'm like, how does this apply to us? That looks like the person who's got 25 years of experience, who forever and a day, people have just come into the bank. They've just walked in the doors. They've got all the skills. They've got all the banking knowledge they need. And then we say, hey, you know what? Things are changing. We're going to create a culture. We're going to go out and we're going to build partnerships. We're going to go on sales calls. And that's when that fear and doubt creeps in and people are like, no, I'm not good at that. I don't like selling. I'm not a good people person. I don't know how to carry on a conversation. And when you tell that, you can literally see those people be like, yeah, that's me. That's me. And when you change their thoughts and the beliefs and you help them understand that we're out to add value, we're out to grow stronger communities, we're out to help people, we're not out to push products, we're not out to take advantage of people and move from product of the month to product of the month. We're here for the long haul. And when we go out with that servant leadership mentality to where, hey, we just want to add value wherever we can, you're going to sow seeds and those seeds are going to come up.
Yeah. Doug, what have you seen just in terms of response or difference it's made to the business?
Yeah, I love seeing the core concepts that we try to take across our whole employee base made even more real and more pertinent as they relate to specific areas of work. And I think we have opportunities for that to continue. But more powerfully is when Chad shares with me, we have a spaced repetition follow-up program of communication that Chad delivers to the participants. And the responses and engagement and vulnerability in print when people send messages in response to what Chad sends to them after the class, hearing real life, deep stories, how people's lives are better because they do it. There could be no greater win-win. They're helping more people achieve and protect financial success, and their life is better. And I guess the third win is everybody they meet gets a little bit of that pixie dust that we had just a very small part in sprinkling the first bit of. I mean, man, there's nothing better than that.
Yeah, that's very cool. John, what have you seen? You've kind of had a unique perspective to see, just from outside the organization. What have you seen? And I'm also curious why you picked out Chad. What made you pick Chad and tell him he needed to get certified? So maybe talk to that, but also just organizationally and in terms of the transformation, what have you seen?
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, we let very few individuals around the world teach our IP. They have to pass through many, many gates that Chad didn't even know he was passing through. But it goes back to what we said earlier, like calls to like. You can tell somebody that, and heck, I didn't know if he was a trained facilitator or not. And it turns out he probably wasn't, but that doesn't matter because many trained facilitators have trained themselves on bad habits. So it's not that. Teaching, like selling, like leading, is about talking less, asking more, and speaking last. I mean, there's some really simple rules that anybody could follow to become a better leader. So Chad was pretty vetted before we gave him our child to raise, and taking one of our children to the Midwest and raising them out in rural Missouri, that's a big risk. But kidding aside, what they've done with that child is they've raised them to an adolescent, maybe even a young adult now, and it's bigger and it's better and it's more impactful than anything we would have done in our headquarters in Rochester, New York. So we love that. And what we've seen from the outside, I get to parachute in every couple of months to visit the organization and many different parts and many different people that I've gotten to know that have been exposed to the learning and development team that Doug leads. I mean, they're happy, they're content, positive expectancy. They're looking forward to the next stage of their career. They're doing things outside of work that they only dreamed of just months or years earlier. Watching the growth and the pivot, and then the confidence with which they now handle themselves in the marketplace. That's rewarding for me. And I don't know all the details of the story, but long before the pandemic, long before major competitors were trying to move into their market space, this organization had prepared themselves for difficult times that they couldn't even predict. And, seeing that their reputation grow, it helps with future acquisitions. It helps attracting talent. All of the wonderful multipliers in business have been impacted by what these two guys, their teams, their support, and the rest of the organization, the senior leadership team. but it's the buy-in. And you guys see this in the classroom. You hear it from your own instructors. The buy-in they now get from all of their employees anytime in development is doing a program. I mean, people are excited. They're expected. I mean, training and development for a lot of corporations has a bad reputation. I'm going to waste another day. Work's going to pile up. I can't apply any of this stuff. I mean, that's the usual appreciation or lack thereof of most corporations' internal training and development. These people are superstars. These people are heroes in the organization now. It took them a long time to get there. They had to sell internally. They had to figure out those skills if they didn't have them. But it's been very enjoyable to watch these two professionals grow, but then the multiplicative effect that they've had throughout the organizations. Yeah, better than compensation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, just from everything I've known up till today and hearing about it today, it's pretty clear that you guys have built a powerhouse
in the rural communities that we serve, and be able to keep the right mindset about helping people achieve and protect financial success. And that's something pretty special. We are proud to serve that market.
Yeah, I love that. All right, gentlemen, we've taken up a lot of your time. I really appreciate you carving out the time and sharing your journey, your insights, your experiences, your takeaways, your nuggets with us. It's been very enjoyable for me, hopefully for you as well. Any final thoughts or words or anything that you want to leave us with before we wrap up here?
I'll just say I appreciate the opportunity. I'm ready to do episode number 2. So whenever we can back on and chat more, because as Doug and John know, I don't like talking about things that don't matter. And I want to have conversations that move things forward and to make an impact. And because of what you all have been able to help us to do, we have made an impact in people's lives. And you can see that. And do we teach them about banking? Yeah. Do we teach them about sales? Yeah. But whenever you come back on day 2 and hear golden nuggets about the conversations that were different at the dinner table the night before, that means something, and that goes pretty far. So I'm super excited and super thankful to be able to get to do this, and appreciate you guys and all the help.
I'd echo it. The service you provided to us, both personally and professionally, we have no other option than to be compelled to pay it forward to everybody we work with in our lives. And I think anybody who's gifted with that opportunity like us really appreciates it.
Yeah. You can tell you've definitely paid it forward. So we always appreciate that. And part 2, I think we've discussed part 2 might include a couple bottles of wine. So we'll maybe line that up. I appreciate the time. John, any thoughts before we wrap here?
These guys are my brothers, and I love them, and I will hope to work with them the rest of our careers. And they are passing it on. They've got people that they are now closer with because of that. Thank you for buying in. Helping elevate us by elevating yourselves. Win-wins all the way around. Thanks again for your time today, guys.
Thank you.
This podcast is powered by Mojo, the people transformation platform. As a global top 20 training firm and the world leader in motivational intelligence development, our clients kept asking us a question: what does the future of professional development look like? So think of this podcast as a teaser for what could exist inside your organization. Because we all use podcasts and AI to learn and improve in our personal lives, right? So why are we not using podcasts and AI to transform our people at work? We've taken everything we've learned from working with 40% of the Fortune 500 in 97 countries worldwide, and we've combined it with cutting-edge technology to give you the most powerful weapon in the history of human development. Here's how it works. Almost like magic, what Mojo does is it generates powerful, targeted conversations among employees to rapidly resolve challenges like low or unbalanced performance, high turnover, poor leadership, low change readiness, low succession readiness, or the merging of cultures and the elimination of silos. Along the way, Mojo embeds a success culture into the DNA of every team at your organization and enhances every interaction your people have from now on, both inside and outside of work. Start a 14-day free trial of Mojo today at joinmojo.com/trial. and experience what has changed hundreds of thousands of lives around the world, mine included. So get started now at joinmojo.com/trial. That's joinmojo.com/trial.
And the more I studied it, the more I began to see that was the overwhelming commonality of the most successful people that I ever met.
And just the empowerment of the conversations, how it just really motivates you. You don't come across people that impact you that way.
Because a lot of people could say to me, oh yeah, no, I get it. But yet they really don't get it.
This, if you really lean into it, can be life-changing.
Mojo's is part of our DNA and what we do during team meetings.
And I just looked at Randy like, oh my God.
I feel like that's made a lot of impact in my direct report's life because they're not afraid to talk to me.
But I started to see what this gentleman did in podcast. And I was like, it was just kind of surreal because it was almost like he foreshadowed what I was going to be up against that week.
They would come in every week and ask me, Paul, how far would you like to get? That's when I told them 105%. And they laughed and I said, no, 105% is where I'm going to be.
I think that concept is one that everybody can buy into, and saying that I can improve 1% from yesterday.
An unstoppable state of mind that enables you and I to achieve everything that we want out of our professional and our personal life.